The wind carries the scent of fresh turned earth and new grass is the kind of spring morning that makes a man grateful to be alive. Samuel Hartwell stands on the porch of the Crawford homestead, his weathered hands resting on the rail he built, with his own two hands 20 years prior. The wood is smooth now, worn by time and touch by winters that tried to break it and summers that tried to warp it. It held. Everything he built here held. He is 71 years old and his bones remind him of that fact every morning. But his mind remains sharp enough to remember every detail of the story he is about to tell. Sharp enough to know that some stories must be told not because they are easy, but because they define who we become. Below him in the west pasture, his daughter Grace stands beside a brass surveyor's transit sunlight, catching the metal and throwing gold across the prairie grass. She is 29 now, no longer the starving child he found in his root cellar all those years ago. Her son, 9 years old and growing like a weed, peers through the eyepiece while Grace adjusts his stance with patient hands. Grace's voice carries on the wind clear and confident. She is teaching the boy the same way Samuel taught her: how to level the instrument, how to read the crosshairs, how to measure the distance between what was and what could be. The boy asks questions, and Grace answers each one with the same careful precision she learned 2 decades ago when the world was trying to take everything from her. Samuel closes his eyes and lets the memory wash over him like water from a spring creek. Cold and clear and unavoidable. There are stories men carry their whole lives, not because they are easy to tell, but because they are impossible to forget. This is such a story. A story about three orphaned children a winter that tried to kill him, and the way a man who thought he had lost everything found something worth living for again. It begins as many hard stories do in darkness and cold. Montana Territory, January 1878. The cold comes first, not the comfortable cold of autumn evenings or the crisp bite of October mornings, but the kind of cold that turns spit to ice before it hits the ground. The kind that makes your teeth ache and your lungs burn with every breath. The kind that kills without mercy or warning. 20 degrees below zero, maybe colder. The thermometer outside the bunkhouse had stopped working at 30 below, the mercury frozen solid in the glass like everything else in this godforsaken winter. Samuel Hartwell wakes to the sound of shouting. His body knows the sound before his mind catches up, 15 years of ranching, teaching him to recognize the difference between the cry of a coyote and the shout of a man who has found trouble. He is out of bed before he fully opens his eyes, his hand finding the Winchester propped beside the door with the practiced ease of someone who has needed it before. The house is cold. The fire in the stone hearth has burned down to embers during the night, and his breath comes out in white clouds as he pulls on his boots. His fingers fumble with the laces stiff from the cold and from 50 years of use. 50 years old. Half a century on this earth, and 15 of those years spent alone in this house that once held a family. The shouting comes again, closer now. Diego Martinez, his foreman, his voice carrying that particular edge that means he is chasing something. Or someone. Samuel grabs his coat and steps out into the night. The cold hits him like a fist. It steals the air from his lungs and makes his eyes water. Instantly, tears freezing on his cheeks before they can fall. The sky above is clear and black stars scattered across it like broken glass. The kind of sky that only comes on the coldest nights when the air is too frozen to hold any moisture at all. He sees Diego's lantern first swinging wildly as the man runs past the barn toward the root cellar. The light catches on something small and dark, a figure stumbling through the snow, moving with the desperate, uncoordinated motion of prey being run to ground. Samuel's boots crunch through ice-crusted snow as he runs. The Winchester is heavy in his hands, and part of him wonders what kind of fool tries to steal from a ranch in this cold. Part of him already knows the answer. The desperate kind. The dying kind. The figure makes it maybe 5 yards from the root cellar door before her legs give out. Her. Samuel sees it now as Diego's lantern swings close. Not a man. Not even a grown woman. A child. A little girl in a threadbare coat that might have been blue once, but is now the gray-brown color of everything that has been worn too long and washed too many times. She goes down hard on the frozen ground, and 3 apples scatter from her coat. They roll across the ice, dark and soft and rotten, the kind of apples a person would only eat if they had no other choice. Diego reaches her first, his breath coming in great white gasps. He raises the lantern high, and the light falls full on the child's face. She is maybe 8 years old, maybe younger. It is hard to tell through the dirt and the desperate thinness that makes her cheeks hollow and her eyes too large in her skull. Her lips are blue, not the faint blue of someone who is simply cold, but the deep purple blue of someone whose body is shutting down. Her fingers, where they clutch at the frozen ground, are the same color frostbite already setting in, despite the worn gloves that cover them. Samuel drops to his knees beside her, the Winchester forgotten in the snow. He has seen death before, seen it in cattle caught in blizzards, in men who wandered too far from shelter, in his own daughter's face as pneumonia took her from him 23 years ago. This child is dying. Another few hours and she will be gone, just another small tragedy in a winter full of them. He reaches for her, intending to lift her, to get her inside where the warmth might give her a fighting chance. His hand brushes against something at her throat. A chain, silver glinting in the lamplight. A locket. Samuel's fingers are stiff and clumsy with cold, but he manages to open it. The world stops. Inside the locket is a photograph. A woman, young and smiling, holding an infant with the fierce, protective love that all mothers have. The woman's face is faded, the photograph old and worn from being carried close to someone's heart. But Samuel would know that face anywhere. Would know it in his sleep, in his dreams, in the darkest moments when grief threatened to pull him under and never let him surface again. Catherine. The word comes out like a prayer, like a curse, like something torn from deep in his chest where he has kept it locked away for 15 years. Diego stares at him. The child stirs weakly in the snow, a small sound escaping her cracked lips. Samuel looks at the girl again, really looks at her, and sees what he should have seen from the first. The shape of her face, the set of her jaw, the stubborn angle of her chin even in unconsciousness. Catherine's face worn down by hunger and cold and desperation, but Catherine's face nonetheless. Christ Almighty, this is Catherine's girl. His hands are shaking as he lifts the child. She weighs nothing, less than nothing. A bird would weigh more. A thought would weigh more. He holds her against his chest and feels the shallow flutter of her heartbeat, weak and irregular. A candle flame in a storm. Diego is asking him something, his voice urgent, but Samuel cannot hear it over the roar in his ears. He is moving his boots, finding purchase on the ice, his body knowing the way to the house, even though his mind is 20 years in the past. Catherine had worked for him once. The winter of 1863, after her mother died, and her father could not manage the farm alone with an infant to care for. She had been 17 years old, smart as a whip and stubborn as a Missouri mule, and she had saved Samuel's daughter. Or tried to. The worst blizzard in 20 years had hit, and little Sarah had wandered out into it, and Catherine had ridden 3 miles through whiteout conditions to bring her back. Sarah had died anyway. 3 days later, pneumonia claiming her, despite everything Catherine did. But those 3 days mattered. They mattered more than Samuel could ever express. 3 days to say goodbye. 3 days to tell his daughter he loved her. 3 days Catherine had given him when, by all rights, Sarah should have frozen to death in that storm. And now, Catherine's daughter lies dying in his arms. The universe has a sense of irony, Samuel thinks as he kicks open the door to the ranch house. A cruel sense of irony. Diego shouts for him to get blankets to stoke the fire to ride for Doc Whitmore. Samuel does not answer. He lays the child on the wooden chair closest to the hearth and wraps her in the quilt that hangs there, the one that smells of cedar and wood smoke and all the lonely years he has spent in this house since his wife left. The child's eyes flutter open. They are gray like storm clouds over the mountains, like Catherine's eyes. She looks at him without recognition, without fear, with only the blank, exhausted stare of someone who has pushed their body past the point where it can feel anything at all. Samuel kneels in front of her and takes her frozen hands in his, rubbing them gently, trying to bring life back into fingers that have forgotten what warmth feels like. Outside, Diego is already mounting his horse, riding hard for town to fetch the doctor. The sound of hoofbeats fades quickly, swallowed by the vast, cold silence of the prairie night. Samuel looks at the child and sees Catherine's face in hers, sees the ghost of a woman who saved his daughter, sees the debt he thought he could never repay, and he makes a decision that will change everything. The fire in the stone hearth crackles and pops as Samuel adds another log, sending sparks dancing up the chimney like tiny stars. The warmth is almost painful after the brutal cold outside, making his skin burn as blood returns to frozen extremities. His hands shake as he fills a tin pot with milk and sets it on the stove to warm. The child sits rigid in the chair wrapped in the cedar-scented quilt, her eyes following his every movement with the wary alertness of a cornered animal. She has not spoken, has not cried. Samuel recognizes that kind of silence. It is the silence of someone who has learned that tears accomplish nothing, that crying only wastes energy better spent on survival. He tries to remember how to do this, how to care for a child. It has been 15 years since he had a daughter. 15 years since he needed to know the temperature of milk, the right way to wrap a blanket, the gentle firmness required to help someone too weak to help themselves. His hands so capable with horses and cattle and fence wire feel clumsy and huge as he pours the warm milk into a tin cup. Too hot and he will burn her. Too cold and it will not help. He tests it against his wrists the way he remembers his wife doing a lifetime ago, when Sarah was small. The child takes the cup when he offers it, but her hands shake so badly that milk sloshes over the rim. Samuel steadies it for her, guides it to her cracked and bleeding lips. She drinks with the desperate gulping of someone who has not had enough for too long, and he has to pull the cup away to keep her from making herself sick. Through the window he sees another lantern approaching, Diego leading two smaller figures up from the wagon that Samuel now notices parked near the barn. More children. The realization hits him like a second blow. This girl did not come alone. The door opens and Diego ushers them inside. A girl maybe 7 years old with the same hollow cheeks and two large eyes. A boy barely 4 gray-faced and stumbling on legs too weak to hold him steady. Both wear clothes that might have fit them once but now hang loose on frames that have wasted away to nothing. The oldest girl, the one Samuel pulled from the snow, speaks for the first time. Her voice is a rasp, barely audible, worn rough by cold and hunger, and probably crying when no one was there to hear. Lily. Tommy. She says the names like a prayer, like the only thing she has left to hold on to. Samuel looks at the three of them and feels something crack open in his chest, someplace he has kept carefully sealed for 15 years. He is not prepared for this, not prepared for the way they look at him with those desperate, hopeful, terrified eyes, not prepared for the weight of their need. But he is here, and they are here, and outside the temperature is still dropping. He helps the younger girl into another chair, wraps her in a blanket. The boy he lifts onto his lap, feeling the bones too close to the skin, feeling the way the child's breath rattles in his chest with each inhalation. This one is the worst off. This one might not make it even with help. The sound of another horse. Faster this time, urgent. Diego has found the doctor. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore sweeps into the room like a storm wind, bringing the cold with her and scattering it with the force of her presence. She is 38 years old, a widow for 5 years, and she carries herself with the quiet authority of someone who has seen too much suffering to be shocked by anything anymore. She was a friend of Samuel's wife. Before Sarah died, before Elizabeth left, before Samuel retreated into himself and spent 15 years avoiding everyone who reminded him of what he had lost. Seeing her now for the first time in all those years is like taking a fist to the gut. She does not look at him, does not waste time on greetings or questions about why he has suddenly called for her after more than a decade of silence. She goes straight to the children, her medical bag already open, her hands quick and efficient as she begins her examination. She starts with the boy, Tommy. Her face is carefully neutral as she listens to his chest with her stethoscope as she examines his distended belly and the sores around his mouth. But Samuel sees the tightness around her eyes, sees the way her jaw clenches. She moves to the middle child, Lily, checks her pulse, her eyes, the way her skin tense when pinched, a sign of severe dehydration that Samuel knows is not good. Finally, she turns to the oldest girl, Grace. Samuel has not learned her name until now, but somehow he knows it fits. There is something graceful about the way she holds herself even now, even starving and frozen and terrified. A kind of dignity that cannot be taken away no matter how hard the world tries. Eleanor's examination is thorough and professional. When she finally speaks, her voice is clinical, carefully stripped of emotion, but Samuel hears the anger underneath. The fury at a world that allows children to come this close to death. How long since you ate, really ate, not scraps? Grace's throat works as she tries to answer. 6 weeks, maybe 7. Where are your parents? The story comes out in pieces, each one another. Weight added to Samuel's chest. Mama died when Tommy was born. Complications from childbirth infection that spread too fast for any doctor to stop. Papa left in October, said he would send for them when he found work in Billings. That was 3 months ago. No word, no money, nothing. Grace had tried to keep them alive, begging, stealing, doing whatever an 8-year-old girl could do to feed two younger children through a Montana winter. But there is only so much an 8-year-old can do. Only so many times you can steal from the same root cellars. Only so long you can survive on rotten apples and creek water and the desperate hope that Papa will come back like he promised. Eleanor stands wiping her hands on a cloth with more force than necessary. She looks at Samuel, and something passes between them. Some wordless conversation built on shared history and shared grief. These children need rest, regular meals, and warmth. Another week in that wagon, and you would have buried the baby. She says it flat clinical, but the words land like stones in still water. Buried the baby, as if it were a foregone conclusion, as if the world were that cruel. Samuel looks at Tommy sleeping fitfully in his arms and thinks about Sarah, about how small she had been at the end, about how he had held her just like this while pneumonia stole her breath. He will not let it happen again. Eleanor packs her supplies with quick, efficient movements. I will come back tomorrow to check on them. She pauses at the door, looks back at Samuel. For the first time since she arrived, she really looks at him, sees the man he has become in the 15 years since they last spoke. You did the right thing calling for me. The words are simple, but they carry weight. Absolution, maybe, or acknowledgement, or just the recognition that sometimes doing the right thing is all a person can manage. She leaves and Samuel is alone with 3 children who are not his, in a house that has been empty for too long, with a decision pressing down on him that he is not sure he is ready to make. But the choice he realizes has already been made. The moment he opened that locket and saw Catherine's face. The moment he picked up Grace and felt how little she weighed. The moment he looked into her gray eyes and saw his own grief reflected back at him. These children need him. And God help him, he needs them too. Needs something to fight for. Needs something to live for beyond the empty routine of days that blur into years. Outside, the wind rattles the windows. The temperature continues to drop. But inside by the fire, 3 children sleep. And Samuel Hartwell sits watch over them, this man who thought his story was over, finding out that perhaps it is only beginning. The door opens without warning. Samuel is on his feet before his mind catches up, his hand moving toward the rifle propped by the hearth. Years of living alone have made him cautious. Years of managing a large ranch have taught him that visitors who do not knock are rarely bringing good news. Diego moves to intercept, but he is too slow. The man in the expensive coat is already inside and already claiming space with the easy arrogance of someone who is used to owning whatever room he enters. Warren Blackwood. Samuel knows him by reputation. Everyone in this part of Montana knows Warren Blackwood. Land agent, lawyer, the man who shows up when banks want to foreclose on properties. The man who always seems to profit when others lose everything. He is 48 years old, clean-shaven, in an era when most men wear beards, dressed in clothes that cost more than most families earn in a year. His eyes are pale blue, cold as the winter sky, and they take inventory of everything they touch. The children huddled by the fire, the rifle within Samuel's reach, the worn furniture and aging house of a man who has money but does not spend it on comfort. Blackwood does not offer his hand. The insult is deliberate. Hartwell. I heard you had some excitement this morning. Samuel says nothing. He has learned over 50 years of living that silence is often the best response to men who love the sound of their own voice. News travels fast in small towns. Blackwood pulls a folded paper from his coat, smooth it on the rough wooden table with hands that have never done a day of hard labor. This is the foreclosure notice for the Crawford homestead. 3 miles east. Burned out soddy failed farm. Tax delinquent for 18 months. He pauses, letting the words sink in, letting Samuel understand what is coming. The bank takes possession in 90 days unless someone settles the debt. Samuel picks up the paper. The words swim in front of his eyes, but he forces himself to focus, to read, to understand. $47 in back taxes, $200 original mortgage, plus interest. Warren's smile does not reach his eyes. The Crawfords are dead. Well, the mother is dead at least. The father has abandoned them, which amounts to the same thing legally speaking. And mortgage debt does not die with the borrower, you understand. It passes to the estate, which means these children inherit the debt along with the land, though I cannot imagine what use a burned-out quarter section is to 3 orphans. Grace's hands clench in the quilt. She is listening to every word, understanding more than an 8-year-old should have to understand. Samuel sets the paper down carefully, forces his voice to remain level. Children cannot inherit debt in Montana. The law is clear on that. Warren buttons his coat with slow, deliberate movements. The law is also clear on vagrancy. Harboring vagrant children without legal custody is a misdemeanor. Sheriff Cooper is a reasonable man, but he has a job to do. These children were starving, and now they are fed. Christian charity, I am sure. But charity has limits, does it not? He moves toward the door, pauses with his hand on the frame. The gesture is theatrical, practiced. A man who knows how to deliver a line. 3 months, Hartwell. Then that land is mine. And these vagrant children, well, the state has facilities for that sort of thing. The door closes behind him. The silence that follows is heavier than the cold outside. Grace stares at the foreclosure notice on the table, her young face old with understanding. Lily has pulled Tommy closer as if she can protect him from words and laws and the grinding machinery of a system designed to crush people who cannot afford to fight back. Samuel stands motionless, looking at the paper, at the numbers that might as well be a death sentence. 90 days. 90 days to find money they do not have, to navigate laws they do not understand, to fight a man who has the system on his side. Diego breaks the silence first, his voice low and angry. That man has no soul. Samuel does not answer immediately. He is thinking, calculating, remembering things he has not thought about in years. Catherine had worked here in 1863, had saved Sarah, had written him a letter after Elizabeth left, a letter he still has somewhere in his desk drawer. A letter that said, grief is the price we pay for love. That said, carry it, do not hide from it. That said, keep living. He looks at Grace, sees Catherine's stubborn chin, sees the way she touches the locket at her throat, the only thing she has left of her mother, sees the fierce, protective way she keeps herself between her siblings and the door as if she can shield them from whatever comes next. Samuel has spent 15 years hiding, 15 years running from anything that made him feel, 15 years convincing himself that isolation was safer than connection, that nothing was better than something that could be taken away. But looking at these children, at the desperate hope mixed with resignation in Grace's eyes, he realizes something. He is tired of hiding. You heard all that he says to Grace. It is not a question. She nods. Your mama, Catherine Crawford. She worked here once, long time ago before you were born. Grace touches the locket. She never talked about it much. Samuel's throat is tight. Something flickers across his face. Pain, recognition, something deeper that has no name. She saved my daughter, or tried to. Gave us 3 more days with her, when by all rights she should have died in a blizzard. He turns back to the stove, pours warm milk into 3 cups. His hands are steady now, purpose flowing through him like water finding its course. Drink this, then sleep. Tomorrow we figure out what comes next. Grace takes the cup but does not drink immediately. Her gray eyes, so like her mother's, study him with an intensity that is uncomfortable. She is measuring him, deciding if he is someone who keeps his word, if he is someone worth trusting. Mr. Hartwell, she says. Her voice is stronger now, warmed by milk and fire, and the first small spark of hope. We have 90 days before Mr. Blackwood takes everything, 90 days before the state comes for Lily and Tommy. Samuel nods. Is that enough time? Enough time to learn how to fight? The question hangs in the air between them. Samuel looks at this 8-year-old girl who has kept 2 younger children alive through a Montana winter, who stole rotten apples to feed them, who walked into his root cellar knowing she might get caught, might get shot, but did it anyway because the alternative was watching her siblings starve. This girl knows how to fight. She just does not know she knows. I do not know if it is enough time, he tells her honestly, but I know we will use every day of it, and I know I do not give up easy, and neither I think do you. Grace's lips quirk in something that might become a smile someday when she remembers how. She drinks the milk. Outside, the wind picks up. The coldest part of winter still ahead. But inside, something is changing. Something is warming. Not just the children by the fire, but Samuel himself. The frozen places inside him beginning to thaw after 15 years. He thinks about the letter from Catherine still in his desk after all these years. Thinks about her words. Keep living. He is trying, Catherine. God help him, he is trying. The children sleep fitfully, their bodies too accustomed to hunger and cold to rest easy, even in warmth and safety. Samuel sits in his chair and by the fire, the one that fits his body like an old glove, and watches them. Watches the rise and fall of their chests. Watches the way Grace, even in sleep, keeps one hand reaching toward her siblings, protecting them, always protecting them. Diego has gone to check on the horses to make sure the stock are settled for the night. The house is quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the whistle of wind under the eaves. Samuel thinks about the foreclosure notice sitting on his table. $47. It might as well be 400, 4,000. Not because he does not have the money. The ranch is profitable. He has savings. But paying off someone else's debt, taking responsibility for 3 children who are not his, fighting a man like Warren Blackwood, who has the law and the banks and the entire system behind him. That is not a $47 decision. That is a life-changing decision. He could send them to the state facilities, could tell himself he did what he could by saving them from freezing, could go back to his quiet, solitary existence where nothing was expected of him and nothing could hurt him. But even as he thinks it, he knows he will not, cannot, because Grace has Catherine's face, because Tommy is the same age Sarah was when she died, because Lily looks at him with those huge, hopeful eyes that believe adults can fix anything if they just try hard enough, because Samuel Hartwell is tired of being a ghost in his own life. The fire burns low. He adds another log, watches the flames catch and spread. There is something hypnotic about fire, something that makes a man think about things he usually keeps buried. He thinks about Catherine as she was in 1863, 17 years old, fierce and determined, and so full of life, it seemed impossible that anything could ever diminish her. He had not been in love with her, had loved his wife, loved his daughter, had no room in his heart for anything that complicated. But he had admired her, had respected her, had known even then that she was someone special. And she had saved Sarah for 3 days. Those 3 days had been both a gift and a curse. A gift because he got to hold his daughter, got to tell her he loved her, got to say goodbye. A curse because he knew every hour of those 3 days that she was dying, that all the warmth and care in the world could not stop what the blizzard and the pneumonia had started. Catherine had stayed the entire time, had not left even when it became clear Sarah was not going to make it, had held Samuel's hand during the worst moments, had been there when Elizabeth, unable to cope with the grief, had finally broken and left. And then Catherine had gone back to her own life, had married Thomas Crawford, had written Samuel a letter that he had read so many times he could recite it from memory. Grief is the price we pay for love. Carry it, do not hide from it. Keep living because Sarah would want that. He had not kept living. Not really. He had survived. He had maintained. He had run his ranch and paid his bills and gone through the motions. But he had not lived. Until tonight. Tonight, with 3 starving children sleeping by his fire, Samuel Hartwell feels something he has not felt in 15 years. He feels needed. He feels purpose. He feels the slow, painful thaw of a heart that has been frozen for too long. It will not be easy. Fighting Warren Blackwood will take everything he has. The man is ruthless, connected, smart. The kind of man who has made a career out of finding loopholes and exploiting weaknesses. But Samuel has something Warren does not. He has a reason to fight that goes beyond money or land or pride. He has 3 children who need him, and he has a debt to Catherine that he can finally repay. The wind rattles the windows. Somewhere in the darkness a coyote howls. The sound is lonely and wild and somehow fitting. This is Montana. This is the frontier. This is a place where the strong survive and the weak perish, and mercy is as rare as summer snow. But tonight in this house there is mercy. There is warmth. There is second chances and old debts and the possibility of redemption. Samuel stands his knees protesting the movement. He is 50 years old and his body reminds him of that fact with every step. but his mind is clearer than it has been in years. Sharper, more focused. He looks at the foreclosure notice one more time. 90 days. 3 months to navigate the legal system, to find proof of whatever fraud Warren has committed, because a man does not build a career on foreclosures without cutting corners somewhere. 3 months to teach Grace how to stand up for herself in a world designed to knock her down. 3 months to remember how to be a father. Samuel folds the notice and puts it in his desk drawer next to Catherine's letter. He will deal with it tomorrow. Tonight he will sleep in a house that is no longer empty. Will wake to the sounds of children rather than silence. It is a start. Outside, the temperature continues to drop. The coldest night of the winter, the thermometer reading numbers that would kill an unprepared man in minutes. But inside, the fire burns warm. The children sleep. And Samuel Hartwell sits watch this man who thought he had nothing left to give, finding out that perhaps he has been saving it all along. For this moment, for these children, for the chance to finally keep Catherine's promise, to keep living. Sunday comes with a clarity that hurts the eyes. The storm has passed, leaving the world crystallized in ice and brilliant under a sun that gives light but no warmth. Samuel stands at his bedroom window, watching the children in the yard below. 3 days have passed since he found them, 3 days of regular meals and warm beds, and the slow, careful process of bringing half-frozen bodies back to life. Grace stands by the well, helping Lily pump water into a wooden bucket. Their movements are still tentative, still careful, as if they do not quite trust that the food will keep coming, that the warmth will last. Samuel understands that wariness. He has felt it himself for 15 years. The fear that anything good is temporary, that happiness is just a prelude to loss. Diego appears beside the girls with an armload of firewood. He says something that makes Lily laugh, a sound so unexpected and bright that Samuel feels it like a physical thing in his chest. When was the last time he heard a child laugh in this house? When was the last time these walls held anything besides silence and ghosts? The clothes Eleanor brought yesterday fit the children better than their rags did, though they still hang loose on frames that need weeks, maybe months of good food to fill out properly. Grace wears a blue calico dress that once belonged to someone else, patched at the elbows but clean and whole. Her hair has been washed and braided, though she did it herself. Samuel suspects not wanting to be a burden, even in something so small. The church bells begin their Sunday morning call, the sound carrying clear and cold across the frozen prairie. Samuel has not attended service in 10 years, has not seen the point in sitting in a building and pretending to commune with a God who took his daughter and his wife and left him with nothing but a big empty house and a successful ranch that meant nothing without someone to share it with. But Eleanor had suggested in her quiet, firm way that the children needed to be seen, needed the town to know they had a proper home, proper care, that if Samuel was going to fight for custody, he needed to show the community these were not vagrant children being exploited, but a family being formed. The word had stuck in his throat. Family. He has not had a family in 15 years. The thought terrifies him more than Warren Blackwood's threats, more than the legal battles ahead, more than the possibility of failure. Because if he lets himself think of these children as family, if he lets himself care the way a father cares, then he is giving grief another chance to destroy him. But when he looks out the window and sees Grace teaching Lily the proper way to carry a full bucket without spilling, sees Tommy toddling after them with the fierce determination of a 4-year-old trying to keep up with his sisters, Samuel knows it is already too late. He cares, God help him, he already cares. The wagon ride to town takes 40 minutes, the horses picking their way carefully over roads still treacherous with ice. Samuel drives while the children huddle in the back, wrapped in blankets against the cold that cuts through even the thickest wool. Grace sits closest to him, her eyes taking in everything. The way the morning sun turns the icicles hanging from fence posts into diamonds. The distant mountains white and sharp against the blue sky. The smoke rising from chimneys in town promising warmth and civilization and all the complicated things that come with human society. She has not asked where they are going, has not questioned his decisions since that first night. It occurs to Samuel that this child has learned not to question adults, has learned that asking why often leads to punishment or disappointment or both. The thought makes him angry in a way he has not been angry in years. They are going to church, he tells her. His voice sounds rusty even to his own ears. to show people you are being cared for, that you have a home. Grace nods, slowly processing this. Then in a voice so quiet he almost misses it, she asks, will they be kind? Samuel does not know how to answer that. He thinks about Crestview, about the people he has avoided for a decade, about small-town politics and the way gossip spreads faster than wildfire, about how quickly people judge and how slowly they forgive. Some will be, he says, finally. Some will not. But what they think does not change what is true. What is true, Grace asks. That you and your brother and sister deserve safety and food and someone who fights for you. That is true regardless of what anyone else thinks. Grace considers this for a long moment. Then she straightens her spine, lifts her chin, in that way that reminds Samuel so much of Catherine, it makes his chest ache. Okay, she says, I can be brave if I need to be. I know you can. Samuel tells her, I have seen you be brave, but you do not have to be brave alone anymore. The words surprise him as much as they seem to surprise Grace. He is not used to saying things like that, not used to making promises he might not be able to keep. But looking at this 8-year-old girl who has carried the weight of 2 younger siblings through a winter that tried to kill them all, Samuel finds he means it. She will not be alone, not if he has anything to say about it. The church sits on the edge of Crestview's town square, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower that leans slightly to the left after a windstorm 5 years back. The sound of hymns drifts through the closed doors, voices raised in praise that Samuel finds both comforting and hollow. He remembers when those songs meant something to him, when he believed in a benevolent God who watched over his children. Now he just hopes God is too busy to interfere. The congregation turns as they enter. Every head swivels. Every conversation stops mid-sentence. The silence is sudden and complete, broken only by the shuffle of their feet and the creak of the door closing behind them. Samuel feels the weight of those stairs like a physical thing, feels them take in the children, the donated clothes, the 2 thin bodies that speak of recent starvation, the way Grace keeps herself between her siblings and the crowd always protecting, even now, Mrs. Margaret Gunderson sits in the 3rd pew, her mouth pursing like she has bitten into something sour. Samuel knows that look, has seen it directed at others who failed to meet her exacting standards of propriety and respectability. She leans to whisper something to the woman beside her, and the whisper spreads like ripples in a pond. Charity case. 3 of them. Can you imagine that Crawford girl, the one whose father ran off? Samuel's hand settles on Grace's shoulder. The gesture is meant to be comforting, but he feels her stiffen under his palm. She has heard the whispers. Of course she has. Children always hear the things adults think they are hiding. Hold your head up, he says quietly. You have nothing to be ashamed of. But shame is not something you can logic away. It lives deeper than reason in the bones and blood, and Grace's bones know she is a burden. Know she is charity. Know she is the kind of problem that makes respectable people uncomfortable. They find a space in the back pew, the children pressed close together, like sheep sensing wolves. Reverend Clay continues the service, his voice rising and falling in familiar patterns, but Samuel barely hears the words. He is too aware of the eyes on them, too conscious of being watched and judged and found wanting by people who have no idea what these children have survived. The hymns pass in a blur. The sermon about loving your neighbor rings with irony so thick Samuel almost laughs. When it finally ends, the congregation flows toward the fellowship hall, where tables groan under the weight of the Sunday potluck. Fried chicken and cornbread and green beans swimming in bacon grease. More food than Samuel has seen in one place in months. More food than these children have probably ever seen at once in their young lives. Go on, he tells them. Eat. But eating means walking past all those eyes. Means running the gauntlet of judgment and pity, and that particularly vicious kind of Christian charity that gives with one hand while condemning with the other. Grace takes Lily's hand. Tommy presses against her other side. Together, they move toward the tables like soldiers advancing into enemy territory, which Samuel supposes is not far from the truth. He is reaching for a plate when it happens. Grace's elbow catches the edge of the gravy boat. It tips. Spills sends brown liquid cascading down the front of her borrowed blue dress. The fellowship hall goes quiet. Every conversation stops. Every eye turns to watch. Grace stands frozen gravy soaking through to her skin. Her face goes red and then white. Her hands clench at her sides. Samuel sees her fighting tears, fighting the urge to run, fighting the shame that threatens to swallow her whole. "Oh, honey," Mrs. Gunderson's voice carries across the sudden silence. "That is the second dress you have ruined this week, is it not? Some people just are not used to nice things." The words land like stones. Samuel feels Grace flinch as if she has been struck, feels Lily's hand tighten in her sister's grip, feels the way Tommy buries his face against Grace's leg trying to hide from all the staring faces. And something in Samuel breaks. Not breaks like it broke when Sarah died. Not the shattering, destructive break that left him hollow and useless. This is different. This is the breaking of a dam that has held back 15 years of anger and grief and the accumulated weight of watching good people suffer while cruel ones prosper. He stands, puts down his empty plate, walks to where Grace stands in her gravy-stained dress, this 8-year-old child who has survived things that would break grown men and who is now being humiliated for the crime of being clumsy with borrowed dishes. "Margaret," he says, his voice is quiet, but it carries. The kind of quiet that makes people pay attention. Dresses can be washed. Dignity cannot. Mrs. Gunderson's eyes widen. Other people begin to shift uncomfortably. This girl, Samuel, continues nearly died from starvation trying to keep her brother and sister alive. I would like to see you or anyone else here do what she did. Survive what she survived. And then come into a room full of strangers and hold your head up despite knowing you are being judged for circumstances beyond your control. He lets his gaze sweep across the fellowship hall, lands on familiar faces, people he has known for decades, people who call themselves Christians and neighbors and good folk. We call ourselves believers. But today, I see people who love judging more than they love mercy, who care more about appearances than they care about children who were dying in the cold 3 days ago. The silence is absolute now. No one meets his eyes. Grace has Catherine's courage, Samuel says more quietly now. Catherine, who rode 3 miles through a blizzard to save my daughter. Catherine, who stayed up for 3 days straight trying to keep Sarah alive. Catherine, who wrote me a letter that kept me from giving up entirely when I had nothing left. He looks down at Grace, sees tears finally spilling down her cheeks. But they are different tears now. Not shame. Something else. Something like hope. Her daughter deserves better than judgment from people who have never known what it means to go hungry. Eleanor appears then as if summoned by his words. She carries a napkin in a quiet fury that matches his own. She kneels beside Grace and begins wiping at the stain with quick, efficient movements. "Happens to everyone, Grace," she says. Her voice is kind but matter of fact. "Last month I knocked an entire pie off the dessert table." She looks up at Mrs. Gunderson and her expression could freeze water. "Is that not right, Margaret? And the month before that, your husband spilled punch all over Reverend Clay's good shoes." Mrs. Gunderson's face colors. "Well, funny how some accidents are worth mentioning and some are not." Eleanor keeps wiping, keeps talking, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Funny how some people get grace and others get gossip." The tension breaks like a fever. Conversations resume, though quieter now, more subdued. People begin moving again, though they give Samuel and the children a wider berth. Eleanor finishes with the stained stands and puts a hand on Grace's shoulder. "There," she says, "good as it will get without a proper washing. Now go get some food, all of you, and do not let anyone make you feel small for existing." They leave as soon as they can. After that, the children silent in the back of the wagon. Samuel does not look back at the church, does not want to see the faces in the windows, the people who will spend the rest of the day talking about Samuel Hartwell's outburst, about his defense of the Crawford orphans, about how grief has clearly affected his judgment. Let them talk. Grace sits beside him on the wagon seat this time, instead of in the back. She has not said anything since they left the fellowship hall, but Samuel feels her presence like a small, warm weight beside him. After a long while, she speaks. "Thank you." The words are so quiet he almost misses them over the sound of the horse's hooves on the frozen road. "You are welcome." No one has ever, she pauses, searching for words. No one has ever stood up for me before. Samuel thinks about Catherine, about Thomas Crawford who abandoned his children when they needed him most, about a world that asks 8-year-old girls to be stronger than they should have to be. Well, he says someone should have. And from now on, someone will. He does not add that the someone is him, does not make promises about forever or family or any of the things he is still too afraid to name. But Grace seems to hear it anyway. She leans slightly against his arm, a small gesture of trust that feels enormous. Behind them, Lily and Tommy have fallen asleep exhausted by the ordeal of being stared at and judged. But Grace stays awake watching the prairie roll past, and Samuel wonders what she is thinking. If she believes him, if she dares to hope that maybe, just maybe this time, an adult will keep their word. He hopes so. He intends to. Sheriff Ben Cooper arrives just after dawn, his horse's breath steaming in the cold morning air. Samuel sees him coming from the kitchen window and knows with the certainty of someone who has lived long enough to recognize patterns that this is not a social call. He has been expecting this. Has known since Warren Blackwood walked out of his house 3 days ago that the legal machinery would begin turning, that a man like Blackwood does not make threats without following through. The children are still asleep upstairs. Samuel is grateful for that. They do not need to hear whatever is about to be said. He meets the sheriff at the door with 2 cups of coffee, already poured, a gesture of hospitality that acknowledges they are not enemies even if they are about to have an unpleasant conversation. Ben accepts the coffee with a nod of thanks. He is a good man, Samuel knows. Fair-minded, not the kind who enjoys wielding power over others. But he is also a man who believes in law and order, in following the rules even when the rules are unjust. Got a complaint filed with the county, Ben says without preamble. Says you are harboring vagrant children without legal custody. Who filed it? Though Samuel already knows the answer. Ben's expression says he knows Samuel knows. Does it matter? It might. Warren Blackwood, through his lawyer. Samuel sips his coffee and waits. Law is the law, Brennan. You want to keep these kids, you need to petition the court for temporary guardianship. Otherwise, I am obliged to place them with the county. How long do I have? Judge Morrison's circuit comes through Friday. You will need to make your case then. Ben shifts his weight, uncomfortable with what he has to say next. For what it is worth, I hope you do. But Blackwood has papers that say the Crawford homestead debt transfers to the children. Says they are wards of whoever holds that debt. That is not how inheritance law works. Maybe not. But Blackwood has lawyers, and you have got 3 hungry kids. Judge might see it different than you would like. Samuel sets down his coffee cup with care. Thank you for the warning, Ben. Was not a warning, was the law. The sheriff looks at him steadily. But if it was a warning, I would say you need a lawyer, a good one. And you need to show the judge these children are better off with you than in a state facility. He climbs back on his horse, starts to ride away, then pauses. Your wife, Ben, says. Before she left, she told my wife that you were the best man she knew, said you just got lost in your grief. Maybe this is your chance to find your way back. He rides off before Samuel can respond, leaving him standing in the cold morning with those words echoing in his head. The best man she knew. Elizabeth had said that before the grief drove her away, before he pushed everyone away and spent 15 years convincing himself that isolation was the same as strength. Inside, he hears small feet on the stairs. Grace appears in the kitchen doorway, her hair mussed from sleep, her eyes wary. I heard horses, she says. Was that the sheriff? Samuel could lie, could tell her it was nothing, could protect her from the knowledge that their temporary safety is even more temporary than she thought. But Grace deserves the truth, has earned it through everything she has survived. Yes, he says, he came to tell me we have a hearing Friday. The court wants to decide if you can stay here or if you need to go to a state facility. Grace goes very still, the kind of still that comes from bracing for a blow you cannot avoid. What do we need to do, she asks. Her voice does not shake. This child, Samuel thinks, with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak, has learned to face bad news without flinching. We need to show the judge you are safe here, cared for, that this is a home and not just charity. Grace nods slowly. Okay, what else? We need to prove Warren Blackwood does not have a legal claim to you or your land. How do we prove that? Samuel does not have an answer yet, but he is starting to form a plan, starting to remember things he knew once about land claims and legal documents, and the careful way lies are constructed by men who think they are smarter than everyone else. I am working on that, he says. But first we need to get through Friday. Grace looks at him with those gray eyes that are too old for her young face. Will you tell the judge the truth about why you are helping us? What truth is that about Mama? about what she did for you. Samuel has not planned to, has thought it would be better to keep Catherine out of it, to make this about simple Christian charity rather than complicated old debts and grief that is never properly healed. But looking at Grace, seeing the need for honesty in her expression, he reconsiders. Yes, he says, I will tell him about your mother, about what she meant to me, about why I owe her more than I can ever repay. Good, Grace says, because people should know Mama was brave, that she mattered, that she did not just die and disappear without leaving anything behind. She did not disappear. Samuel tells her gently, she left you and your brother and sister. That is not nothing, Grace. That is everything. Eleanor comes after dark, as she has every evening since that first night, to check on the children, she says, though Samuel suspects it is also to check on him, to make sure he has not retreated back into the shell he lived in for 15 years. They sit on the porch, despite the cold, wrapped in coats, and watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The children are inside, supposedly doing chores, but more likely playing some game that involves Tommy's delighted shrieks echoing through the house. The sound makes Samuel smile. Makes Eleanor smile too, he notices. You are good with them, she says. Better than you think you are. I do not know what I am doing half the time. None of us do. We just pretend better. They sit in comfortable silence for a while. Samuel and Eleanor have known each other for nearly 30 years. She was Elizabeth's closest friend. Was there when Sarah was born, when Sarah died, when Elizabeth left. She is one of the few people who knows the full story, all the broken pieces Samuel has spent 15 years trying to glue back together. Ben Cooper came by, Samuel says finally. I heard. Everyone hears everything in this town. Eleanor's lips quirk. One of its charms. He says I need to petition for custody Friday. Need to convince Judge Morrison I am not exploiting these children. Are you? The question is so unexpected. Samuel actually laughs. No, I am terrified of them. Good, Eleanor says. Fear means you understand the responsibility. Men who are not afraid of raising children are usually the ones who should not be doing it. She shifts in her chair, turns to face him more directly. Samuel, she says, and there is something in her voice that makes him pay attention. The hearing Friday is going to be difficult. Warren Blackwood is going to paint you as someone taking advantage of desperate children. You need to be prepared to defend not just your intentions, but your capacity to care for them. I know, do you? Because caring for 3 traumatized children is not like running a ranch. It is not about providing food and shelter. It is about being present, being patient, being willing to let them need you even when it is terrifying to be needed. Samuel knows this, has been feeling it every day since he found Grace in his root cellar, the weight of their need pressing against his chest like a physical thing. Why are you telling me this, he asks. Because I care about those children. And she pauses, looks away toward the darkening horizon. And I care about you, always have. Even when you were doing your best to make everyone stop caring. The words hang between them. Not quite a confession, not quite an accusation. Just truth stated plainly in the way Eleanor has, of cutting through nonsense to get to what matters. Nora, Samuel starts, but she shakes her head. I am not asking for anything, Samuel. I just need you to know that you are not alone in this. That when you go into that courtroom Friday, there will be people standing with you. People who believe you can do this. People who want you to succeed. She stands gathering her medical bag. I will testify Friday about the children's health, about the care they have received, and about the fact that they are thriving here in ways they could not possibly thrive in a state facility. Thank you, Samuel says. The words feel inadequate. Eleanor pauses at the door. Your wife was wrong, you know. About what? About you being lost. You were not lost. You were hiding. There is a difference. Lost means you want to be found. You did not want that. Did not think you deserved it. And now, Eleanor says with a small smile, you have 3 children who need you too much to let you keep hiding. Consider yourself found, Samuel Hartwell. She leaves before he can respond, her footsteps crunching across the frozen ground toward her wagon. Samuel watches her go and thinks about being found, about being needed, about the terrifying prospect of caring again after spending so long convincing himself that not caring was safer. Inside, Grace appears in the doorway. Was that Miss Eleanor? Yes. Is she your friend? Samuel considers this. Yes, he says, she is. Good, Grace says with the firmness of someone making a decision. You should have friends. Everyone should. The simple wisdom of it makes Samuel's throat tight. Even me, he asks, especially you, Grace tells him. Then she disappears back inside, back to her siblings, and whatever game has Tommy shrieking with laughter. Samuel sits alone on the porch and thinks about friendship, about Eleanor's steady presence, about how she has somehow managed to slip past his defenses without him noticing until now, about how maybe, just maybe, he is not as alone as he thought he was. The stars are fully out now, bright and cold and infinite. Somewhere up there, if there is any justice in the universe, Catherine can see what is happening, can see her children safe and warm, can see Samuel finally trying to keep the promise she made him make all those years ago. Keep living. He is trying, Catherine. God help him, he is trying. The courthouse sits at the edge of Crestview's town square, a squat brick building that smells of old paper and wood polish and something metallic Samuel cannot name. Fear, maybe, or justice. He is not sure there is a difference. Judge Henry Morrison presides over the circuit court that covers this part of Montana territory. He is a gray man with gray hair and gray eyes that give nothing away. Samuel has seen him in town over the years, knows his reputation for fairness, but also for strict adherence to the letter of the law. The courtroom fills slowly. Warren Blackwood sits at the front table with his lawyer, both men dressed in expensive suits that cost more than most families earn in a year. They exude confidence, the easy assurance of people who believe the system is designed to work in their favor. Because it usually is. Samuel sits at the opposite table with Grace beside him. He had wanted to leave her at home with Diego watching Lily and Tommy, but Grace had insisted on coming, had said she wanted to hear what people said about her, wanted to face whatever came next instead of hiding from it. Samuel understands that impulse, respects it even, but he also wishes she did not have to be here, wishes she could just be a child instead of someone who has to listen to adults debate whether she deserves safety. All rise, the bailiff calls. Judge Morrison enters, takes his seat behind the bench with the kind of efficiency that suggests he has done this thousands of times before and found none of it surprising. Be seated. He looks down at the papers in front of him. This is a hearing regarding temporary custody for 3 minor children: Grace Ellen Crawford, age 8, Lily Marie Crawford, age 7, Thomas James Crawford, age 4, currently residing with Samuel Hartwell at the Hartwell Ranch. He looks up. Mr. Hartwell, you have petitioned for temporary guardianship while the court investigates the legal status of these children and their property. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Blackwood, through counsel, has filed objections claiming these children are vagrant and that harboring them without proper custody is unlawful. Is that also correct? Warren's lawyer stands. Yes, Your Honor. We also contend that Mr. Hartwell's interest in these children is not purely charitable. The Crawford homestead has significant debt attached to it, and we believe Mr. Hartwell is positioning himself to claim the property once he establishes guardianship. Samuel feels Grace stiffen beside him, feels her young body go rigid with the understanding that people think the worst of him, that they think he is using her. The judge makes a note. We will hear testimony on both matters. Sheriff Cooper, you filed the initial report. What can you tell the court? Ben stands his hat in his hands. Your Honor, I was called to investigate a complaint about vagrant children. When I arrived at the Hartwell Ranch, I found 3 minors who had been taken in after being found near death from exposure and starvation. Mr. Hartwell provided them with emergency shelter and medical care. And your assessment of the current situation? The children appear well cared for. They have adequate food, clothing, and shelter. They are not being visibly mistreated. But Warren's lawyer interjects they are also not in school, are not receiving proper socialization, are being kept isolated on a remote ranch, Your Honor. Eleanor's voice cuts through the courtroom. She stands in the gallery, her medical bag clutched in front of her like a shield. May I speak? Judge Morrison looks at her with something that might be amusement. Dr. Whitmore, I assume you have medical testimony relevant to this case. I do, Your Honor. I have been treating the Crawford children since the night Mr. Hartwell found them. With the court's permission, I would like to present evidence of their condition then and now. Proceed. Eleanor moves to the front, opens her bag, and produces a leather folder. Inside are photographs that make Samuel's stomach turn, even though he has seen the reality of what they show. Grace's hollow cheeks, Tommy's distended belly, Lily's frostbite-damaged fingers. These children were 6 weeks malnourished when Mr. Hartwell found them, Eleanor says. Her voice is clinical, precise, stripped of emotion in the way doctors learn to speak when dealing with tragedy. The infant had pneumonia. The middle child showed signs of chronic dehydration. Grace here, she looks directly at the girl beside Samuel, was 2 days from organ failure. She produces charts, medical records, documentation of weight gain and recovery. In 3 days, she continues, these children have gained back a combined 26 pounds. Their color has returned. Tommy's pneumonia is responding to treatment. They are eating, sleeping, beginning to heal from trauma that should have killed them. Eleanor closes the folder and looks directly at Judge Morrison. Another week and we would have been notifying next of kin instead of filing custody papers. Mr. Hartwell saved their lives. Now the question is whether we let him continue that work or we punish him for having the decency to act when no one else did. Warren's lawyer stands quickly. No one is punishing anyone, Your Honor. But sentiment does not change the law. These children have no legal guardian. The debt on their property passes to whoever assumes custody. Mr. Hartwell may have acted charitably, but that does not give him the right to circumvent proper legal channels. Mr. Hartwell, Judge Morrison says, why do you want custody of these children? And here it is, the moment Samuel has been dreading. The moment he has to explain something he barely understands himself. He stands slowly. His knees protest, his heart pounds, but his voice when it comes is steady. Your Honor, my daughter died 15 years ago. My wife left shortly after. I have spent the last 15 years alone running my ranch and convincing myself that was enough. That I did not need anything more than work and routine and the kind of peace that comes from not caring about anything that can be taken away. He pauses, breathes, continues. 3 days ago, I found Grace Crawford in my root cellar stealing rotten apples to feed her siblings. She was dying. They were all dying. And when I saw the locket around her neck, I recognized the picture inside. Her mother, Catherine, worked for me once. During the winter of 1863, when my daughter got lost in a blizzard, Catherine rode 3 miles through conditions that should have killed her to bring Sarah back. She gave us 3 more days with our daughter before pneumonia took her. The courtroom is very quiet now. Even Warren's lawyer has stopped shuffling papers. Catherine wrote me a letter after my wife left. Told me that grief was the price we pay for love. That I should keep living because Sarah would have wanted that. I did not listen. I spent 15 years hiding from life, from connection, from anything that might hurt me again. He looks down at Grace, sees her watching him with those gray eyes so like her mother's. When I found Catherine's daughter dying in the snow, I understood something. That debt does not always have to be about money or property or legal obligations. Sometimes it is about being given a chance to pay forward the kindness someone showed you, to save a life the way someone once tried to save yours. He turns back to the judge. I want custody because I owe Catherine, because these children need someone who will fight for them, and because he pauses, forces himself to say it because I have forgotten how to be human, how to care, how to matter. And these children are giving me a chance to remember. The silence that follows feels enormous. Then Grace stands. Samuel reaches for her, but she steps forward before he can stop her. Her voice when she speaks is small, but clear. Excuse me, Your Honor. Can I say something? Judge Morrison's expression softens slightly. You are Grace, yes, sir. What would you like to say? Grace looks at Warren Blackwood, then at the judge, then at Samuel. My mama told me once that the world has 2 kinds of people. People who help when things are hard, and people who only show up when things are easy. She said you can always tell which kind someone is by watching what they do when they do not have to do anything. She touches the locket at her throat. Mr. Hartwell did not have to help us. He could have sent us away, could have let the law deal with us, could have protected himself and his ranch and his peaceful life. But he did not. He brought us in, fed us, sat up with Tommy when he was coughing so bad he could not breathe, taught me about boundaries and property rights and how to stand up for myself even when I am scared. Her voice gets stronger. He came to church with us even though people stared and whispered mean things. He stood up to Mrs. Gunderson when she said I was not used to nice things. He told everyone that I was brave and that Mama was brave and that we deserve better than judgment from people who have never been hungry. Grace looks at the judge with an intensity that seems impossible for someone so young. I do not know what the law says, but I know Mr. Hartwell is the kind of person Mama told me to look for, the kind who helps when it is hard. And if the law says we cannot stay with him, then she pauses, chin lifted. Maybe the law is wrong. The courtroom erupts in murmurs. Judge Morrison's gavel comes down once. Order. He looks at Grace for a long moment, then at Samuel, then down at the papers in front of him. I am going to grant temporary custody, he says finally. 30 days while the court investigates the legal status of the Crawford property and the debt associated with it. Mr. Hartwell, you will report to this court monthly any concerns about the children's welfare, and we revisit this decision. Understood. Yes, Your Honor. Good. He brings his gavel down again. Next case. Outside, Samuel stands on the courthouse steps and realizes his hands are shaking. 30 days. They have bought themselves 30 days. It is not permanent, not even close, but it is something. It is a chance. Grace slips her hand into his. Did we win for now? Samuel tells her. For now, we won. She squeezes his hand and Samuel feels something shift in his chest. Some wall he has kept carefully maintained for 15 years developing its first crack. Not breaking, not yet, but beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, it does not need to be quite so high anymore. Behind them, Eleanor emerges from the courthouse. She catches Samuel's eyes and nods once, a gesture of approval, of solidarity, of something else that Samuel is not quite ready to name. 30 days, he thinks. 30 days to figure out how to prove Warren Blackwood's claim is fraudulent. 30 days to learn how to be a father again. 30 days to decide if he is brave enough to risk caring. It will have to be enough. February comes with a thaw that turns the roads to mud and makes everything smell like wet earth and horse manure. The kind of smell that reminds a man spring is coming that winter cannot last forever, no matter how much it tries. Samuel stands in the west pasture with a wooden case at his feet, watching Grace help Lily gather eggs from the hen house. 3 weeks since the custody hearing. 3 weeks of regular meals and established routines in the slow, careful process of learning how to be a family instead of just people living under the same roof. The brass surveyor's transit gleams in the afternoon sun when Samuel opens the case. It is the same instrument he used 20 years ago when he first surveyed this land, when Montana was still territory, and the frontier felt infinite instead of closing in on itself year by year. The metal is cold under his fingers, familiar like greeting an old friend after too long apart. Grace appears at his elbow, silent as a shadow. She has gotten good at that moving, without sound, a skill learned from months of stealing food and trying not to get caught. Samuel wishes she did not have that skill. Wishes she had grown up safe enough to be loud and careless the way children should be. But we work with what we have, not what we wish we had. What is that, Grace asks. Her eyes are fixed on the transit with the intensity she brings to everything new. Everything that might be useful. Everything that might help her protect her siblings. A surveyor's transit, Samuel tells her, for measuring land, marking boundaries, settling disputes about who owns what. He sets it on its tripod, adjusts the legs until the bubble in the spirit level settles perfectly centered. Grace watches every movement, her mind already working to understand the mechanics, the purpose, the way this tool might matter to her future. Your land, the Crawford homestead, Samuel continues. Blackwood says it is worthless, says the debt is worth more than the property. But he is lying. How do you know? Because I surveyed it myself 20 years ago when your grandfather bought it. Quarter section of good grazing land. Spring-fed creek that never runs dry. Timber rights that could bring in income for decades. Not worthless, not even close. He shows her how to sight through the eyepiece, how to read the crosshairs, how to calculate distance using mathematics she has never learned in school because she has never been to school long enough to learn anything beyond basic reading. Her hands shake at first. The eyepiece wavers. She cannot hold it steady enough to get a clear reading. Samuel puts his hands over hers, stills them. You are trying too hard, he says. Relax. Let the instrument do the work. You are just guiding it. Grace takes a breath, tries again. This time the image comes clear. I see it, she whispers. The fence post. I can see exactly how far away it is. Good. Now read the numbers. Tell me what they say. She does her voice gaining confidence with each digit. Samuel checks her reading against his own mental calculation. She is off by maybe 3 inches. For the first attempt for an 8-year-old child with shaking hands and no training, it is remarkable. You are good at this, he tells her. Your mama would be proud. Grace's throat works. You really think so? I know so. She was smart like you, stubborn too. Would not quit once she set her mind to something. They work until the sun starts dropping toward the western mountains, painting the prairie gold, and amber and deep crimson. Grace's measurements improve with each attempt. By the time full darkness threatens, she can sight a fence line within 6 inches. Better than some men Samuel has known, who claim to be professional surveyors. Diego appears on horseback, riding hard from the direction of town. Even from a distance, Samuel can read the urgency in the way he sits his saddle, the way he does not slow until he is almost on top of them. Mr. Hartwell. Diego's breath comes fast, his horse's sides heaving. Town. Bank is holding an auction next Saturday. Crawford Homestead and 6 other properties. Samuel feels something cold settle in his gut. 6 properties, all foreclosures, all families who could not make winter payments, all vulnerable to whatever scheme Warren Blackwood is running. How much for the Crawford Homestead starting bid? $47. The back taxes. Samuel does the math quickly. $47 might as well be $400. Not because he lacks the money. The ranch is profitable. He has savings. But paying taxes on someone else's land, bidding on property he does not own, fighting Warren in a public auction where everyone will see and judge and talk. That is not a $47 decision. That is declaring war. Diego shifts in his saddle, clearly wanting to say more, but unsure if he should. What else? Samuel asks. Mrs. Chen at the general store. She says Blackwood has been meeting with men from Helena. Land speculators, she thinks. Buying drought land cheap, waiting for rain, then selling at 10 times the price. Grace has been listening to all of this, her young face serious. Why does he want our land so badly, if it is just a burned-out homestead, like he says? That Samuel tells her is exactly the right question. And tomorrow we start finding the answer. Saturday arrives with clear skies and cold air that makes breath visible. The town square fills early despite the temperature. Auctions draw crowds the way circuses do, people hungry for spectacle, even when the spectacle is watching their neighbors lose everything. Samuel arrives with the children, Diego driving the wagon, while Samuel sits in back with Grace. He is dressed in his best suit, the one he wore to the custody hearing, the one that still smells faintly of mothballs from 15 years in a trunk. He has shaved, combed his hair, made himself presentable in the way a man does when he is about to do something that will be talked about for years. Grace wears her blue calico dress, cleaned and pressed. Lily and Tommy huddled together in their warmest coats, their eyes wide at the spectacle of so many people gathered in one place. The auctioneer stands on a raised platform in front of the bank, a thin man with a voice like a rusty hinge. He starts with the Morrison farm. 320 acres, good soil, established house. The family stands to the side, the father's face carved from stone, the mother weeping quietly. Their children cluster around them, not understanding why home is being taken away, but understanding that something terrible is happening. Warren's agent raises his paddle. $50. No one else bids. $50 for land worth 10 times that. The silence is ugly, thick with shame and anger, and the helpless understanding that this is how the world works. The powerful take from the weak, and the rest watch and do nothing. Sold, the auctioneer says. The pattern repeats. Property after property sold for fractions of their value. Warren's agent the only bidder each time. The crowd shifting uncomfortably, but no one willing to fight. Then the auctioneer calls the Crawford Homestead. Quarter section 3 miles east of town. Burned structures, spring-fed creek timber rights included. Starting bid $47 for back taxes. Do I hear 47? Warren's agent raises his paddle. 50, Samuel says. His voice carries across the square, cutting through the murmur of the crowd like a blade through water. Every head turns. The murmuring stops. Samuel feels the weight of hundreds of eyes, but keeps his own fixed on the auctioneer. I have 50. Do I hear 60? 60, Warren's agent calls. 80, 100, 150. The crowd presses closer now, sensing drama, sensing conflict. Grace sits beside Samuel in the wagon, her hand gripping his sleeve. He can feel her trembling, can feel the moment stretching thin, ready to snap. 200, Warren's agent says. 300, Samuel counters without hesitation. The crowd gasps. $300, more than most men earn in 6 months. Warren himself steps forward. He has been standing in the crowd watching, waiting. Now he moves to the front, his expensive coat perfect despite the mud, his face carefully neutral. $500, he says, looking directly at Samuel while he says it. The crowd noise swells. $500 for a burned-out homestead. Everyone understands now. This is not about the land. This is about power. About two men with history neither will name. Samuel stands in the wagon, makes sure everyone can see him. $800. The gasp from the crowd is audible. Diego makes a small sound of distress. Grace's grip on Samuel's sleeve tightens until her knuckles go white. Warren smiles. It is not a pleasant expression. $1,000, he says. Samuel does math in his head. $1,000 is nearly everything he has saved over 15 years. $1,000 is security, is the buffer between prosperity and disaster. But he thinks about Grace learning to use the transit, about the way her hands steadied with practice, about Catherine riding through a blizzard to save Sarah, about debts that have nothing to do with banks or interest rates. He thinks about Eleanor saying he is a good man, about believing it maybe for the first time in 15 years. $1,200, Samuel says. The silence is absolute. More than Warren expected. More than anyone expected. More than the land is worth in any reasonable calculation. But Samuel is not being reasonable. He is being faithful. Warren's jaw works. His hands clench. For a long moment, Samuel thinks he will bid higher. Then Warren smiles again, colder this time. Let him have it, he says to his agent, loud enough for everyone to hear. Let Samuel Hartwell buy the most expensive pile of ashes in Montana territory. He turns to face Samuel directly. Enjoy your charity case, Hartwell. All three of them. I am sure they will appreciate your sacrifice when winter comes again and you cannot afford to feed them. Warren walks away, leaving the crowd buzzing with speculation and judgment. The auctioneer brings his gavel down, sold to Mr. Samuel Hartwell for $1,200. Samuel sits. His legs feel weak. His hands shake slightly as he takes the deed. $1,200. Gone. 15 years of saving converted into a piece of paper that says Grace Ellen Crawford is the legal owner of 1/4 section in Montana territory. Diego turns in the driver's seat. Sir, that was necessary, Samuel finishes. Grace is very quiet beside him. When Samuel looks down, he sees tears on her cheeks. But they are not sad tears. Thank you, she whispers, for not letting him take it. Samuel puts his arm around her thin shoulders. Your land is yours, he tells her. Now we just have to make sure it stays that way. They ride home in silence, the deed tucked safely in Samuel's pocket. Samuel knows what people will say, that he is a fool, that grief has affected his judgment. Let them say it. Some things are worth more than money. Monday morning arrives with Diego's urgent voice in the kitchen. Samuel dresses quickly, finds Diego with papers spread across the table. I checked the county records, like you asked, Diego says. Found something strange. Strange how the Crawford homestead deed, original mortgage, was signed in April 1878. But the signature. Diego pushes one document towards Samuel. I have seen your grandfather's handwriting. This is not it. Samuel picks up the mortgage document, studies the signature. John Crawford, written in careful practice script. Too careful, too practiced. He pulls out the will from Grace's grandfather, compares them side by side. They do not match. The J in John has a different slant. The C in Crawford has a flourish in the mortgage that does not appear in the will. Small differences that matter enormously in a court of law. You are saying this is forged, Samuel says. I am saying it does not match verified handwriting. And there is more. Diego produces a survey map. According to this, the northeast corner marker should be here. But when I measured yesterday using your transit, he taps a spot 200 yards away. The actual marker is here. Samuel studies the map. 200 yards. That is not error. That is deliberate fraud. Someone moved the markers, Diego continues, or never put them in the right place to start. Either way, if the boundaries are wrong, the foreclosure might be wrong too. Samuel sits, his mind racing. If the mortgage is forged and the boundaries are wrong, then Warren's entire claim collapses. The debt might not exist at all. Grace and her siblings would own the land free and clear. But proving it, that is the hard part. We need an expert, Samuel says. Someone who can testify about handwriting, about survey boundaries. And we need to find the original property markers before Warren makes them disappear. Diego nods. Spring thaw starts this week. Ground will be soft enough to dig. Grace appears in the doorway, her eyes sharp despite the early hour. I heard horses. What is wrong? Samuel considers protecting her from this. But Grace has earned the truth. Your grandfather's signature on the mortgage does not match his real signature, which means someone forged it. Grace moves closer, studies the documents. Mr. Blackwood. Probably. Or someone working for him. Either way, if we can prove the signature is fake and the boundaries are wrong, Samuel meets her eyes. The debt does not exist. The land is yours, free and clear. Hope flickers across Grace's face before she forces it down. She has learned not to hope too hard. How do we prove it? We find evidence. We bring it to Judge Morrison. We show him Warren Blackwood built his case on lies. The sound of another horse, Eleanor this time arriving earlier than usual, her face flushed. Samuel, she says, the whole town is talking about the auction. Warren is telling everyone you are financially ruining yourself to exploit these children. Let him talk. I am serious. He is painting you as unstable, building a case that you are not fit to have custody. Eleanor's hand finds his across the table. Samuel feels the warmth of it, the steady presence she has been offering. We have evidence, he tells her. The mortgage is forged. The boundaries are wrong. That is a big if, Samuel, Eleanor says quietly. And while you are gathering evidence, Warren is gathering support. Then we work faster. Samuel stands. Diego, ride to Helena. Find the best handwriting expert you can. Sir Diego says carefully. After the auction, money might actually be an object. Then I will mortgage this ranch if I have to. Samuel's voice is firm. This is not about money anymore. This is about proving that 3 orphan children have a right to their family's land. That men like Warren Blackwood cannot steal from the vulnerable just because they know how to manipulate the system. Grace's breath catches. Lily and Tommy have appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. They are all staring at Samuel with expressions that mix hope and fear. I mean it, Samuel says, looking at each of them. You are my children, my family, and I protect what is mine. Diego clears his throat. I will leave for Helena within the hour. I will speak to Judge Morrison, Eleanor adds. Privately, let him know there are irregularities. She squeezes Samuel's hand once, quick and firm. You are doing the right thing, even if it costs everything. After she leaves, Grace approaches Samuel slowly. Her face is serious adult. Mr. Hartwell, she begins, then stops. Corrects herself. Samuel, it is the first time she has called him by his given name. The intimacy makes something in Samuel's chest go tight. If this goes wrong, Grace continues, if the judge decides you spent too much money or that we are too much trouble, I want you to know I understand. I would not blame you if you changed your mind about us. Samuel kneels so he is at eye level with her, puts his hands on her shoulders. Listen to me very carefully, Grace Ellen Crawford. I spent $1,200 on that land because it is yours, because your grandfather worked for it, because your mother loved it, because you and Lily and Tommy deserve to have roots. But what if we lose? What if Mr. Blackwood wins anyway? Then we lose together, as a family, and then we figure out what comes next, also together. The 3 children move closer. Tommy wraps his arms around Samuel's leg without hesitation, now no longer the wary child who flinched at sudden movements. Lily takes Grace's hand, and Grace for once lets herself lean against Samuel's side. They are a family now, not by blood or law yet, but by choice, by the decision to stand together when the world says run. Outside, the sun rises higher. Spring is coming. Samuel holds his children, all 3 of them, and thinks about Catherine, about how her children are saving him now, pulling him back into a world he thought he had left behind forever. Keep living, she had written. He is living now, and he is not going to stop. 2 days pass in relative calm. Diego rides for Helena. Eleanor makes her visit to Judge Morrison. Samuel and Grace spend hours at the Crawford homestead, with the transit searching for the misplaced boundary markers that will prove Warren's fraud. They are working in the east section when a buggy appears on the road. Not Eleanor's familiar wagon. Something finer, more expensive. Samuel straightens one hand, moving instinctively toward the rifle propped against the transit case. Then he recognizes the driver. Margaret Blackwood. She is alone, which is unusual. Women of her station rarely travel unaccompanied. She wears a simple dark dress, no jewelry, her face pale and drawn. When she climbs down from the buggy, Samuel sees her hands are shaking. "Miss Blackwood," Samuel says. His voice is carefully neutral. "Mr. Hartwell." She looks at Grace standing protectively behind Samuel. "And you must be Grace. She pauses, searching for words. "I need to speak with you. Both of you, if you will allow it." Samuel exchanges a glance with Grace. The girl's face is wary but curious. He nods once. "Speak then." Margaret takes a breath. "My husband, Warren, he..." She stops, starts again. "You need to understand him, why he does what he does, not to excuse it, but to know what you are facing." She pulls a handkerchief from her pocket, twists it between her fingers. Warren's father lost everything in 1848. A homestead claimant in Nebraska. A man from the bank said the boundaries were wrong. Took the land. Warren's family lived in a tent through winter. She looks up and Samuel sees tears in her eyes. His little sister died. Pneumonia. She was 6 years old. Just 6. And Warren, he was 8, same age as you, Grace. He watched her die in that tent because their father did not know how to read legal documents, did not understand boundary markers, did not know the law well enough to fight back. Samuel feels something shift in his chest, a grudging understanding he does not want to feel. Warren swore he would never be powerless again, Margaret continues. He learned law, became an expert in land claims, started helping families file correctly. But somewhere, her voice breaks. Somewhere he crossed a line. The first forgery was correcting an obvious error, he said. Then another. Then another. Each time easier than the last. She looks at Grace. "I have known for years. Told myself he had reasons. That the families he took from were careless. Then I saw you, 8 years old, starving, and I saw Warren willing to let 3 children die to cover his crimes." Margaret's hands clenched the handkerchief. "I realized I had become complicit in creating the very thing that killed Warren's sister, the thing his father faced. And I cannot live with that anymore." "Why are you telling me this?" Samuel asked quietly. "Because you need to know. Warren will not back down. He cannot. Every property he has taken through fraud, if one case falls apart, they all collapse. 16 families will come forward. He will lose everything." She meets Samuel's eyes. He will do anything to stop that. Anything. "Be careful, Mr. Hartwell. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous kind." She climbs back into her buggy, then pauses. "What you are doing, taking in these children, fighting for them. It is what I should have done years ago. What I hope to do now, however late." She drives away, leaving Samuel and Grace standing in the cold wind. Grace is quiet for a long moment. Then she says, "She was brave. To come here. To tell the truth." "Yes," Samuel agrees. "Sometimes courage looks like standing up and fighting. And sometimes it looks like admitting you were wrong." He looks at the survey documents in his hands, at the evidence of Warren's fraud, and he thinks about an 8-year-old boy watching his sister die in a tent, about grief and rage twisted into something dark over 30 years. It does not excuse what Warren has done, but it explains it. And understanding your enemy, Samuel has learned that is the first step to defeating him. They return to their measurements, to the slow, careful work of finding truth buried under decades of lies. The attack comes 3 nights later. Samuel wakes to the smell of smoke. His body knows what it means before his mind catches up. 15 years of ranching, teaching him to recognize the particular scent of burning wood and hay and the terrible chemistry of fire consuming a barn. He is out of bed and running before he fully opens his eyes. Diego is already in the yard shouting, organizing. Flames climb the west side of the barn, orange and vicious, driven by wind that should not be blowing that direction. Samuel grabs a bucket, joins the desperate chain forming from the well. The heat is intense. The smoke chokes. His hands blister on the bucket handles, but he keeps going because stopping means losing everything. Eleanor appears from somewhere, must have been staying late again to check on the children. She has Grace, Lily, and Tommy with her, wrapped in blankets, standing well back from the flames. Grace's face is white with fear. Tommy is crying. Neighbors start arriving. Men, Samuel barely knows, forming bucket brigades, fighting alongside him because this is what people do in Montana. You help your neighbor fight fire because next time it might be yours. It takes 3 hours to contain. By the time the last ember dies, the barn is gone. Nothing left but blackened timbers and the acrid smell of burned wood. They stand in the mud covered in soot and ash, exhausted beyond words. The sun is starting to rise, painting the destruction in shades of gray and gold. Diego moves close to Samuel, his voice low. This was not an accident. Samuel knows, has known from the moment he saw the pattern of the flames. Multiple points of origin, Diego continues. Someone set this deliberately. Samuel's hands clench. He has spent $1,200 on Grace's land. Now his barn is gone. The loss is staggering. The message is clear. Warren, he says, it is not a question. Cannot prove it, Diego admits. But yes, who else? Samuel looks at the ruins, at the scared faces of his children, at everything they have built in 3 weeks now, threatened by a man who will burn the world rather than admit defeat. He knows the sheriff. Ben Cooper is a fair man, but he operates by evidence, by proof. Without witnesses, without physical evidence linking Warren to the fire, there is nothing Ben can do. Which means Warren can strike again, can keep striking until Samuel has nothing left. Until keeping these children means losing everything else. Grace approaches slowly. Her face is set in lines too adult for an 8-year-old. She has been watching Samuel, reading him the way she has learned to read adults, looking for signs of surrender. We should pull back, she says. Her voice is small but firm. Drop the case. Let him have the land. Samuel turns to her. What? He burned your barn. Next time it could be the house, could be us. She looks at Lily and Tommy still wrapped in Eleanor's arms. I will not let them get hurt because of me. Grace Eleanor starts, but Samuel raises a hand. He kneels in the mud in front of Grace, puts his hands on her shoulders, looks directly into her gray eyes. Listen to me, Grace Ellen Crawford. The world is full of men like Blackwood who win because good people get scared and back down. His voice is steady, firm. The voice of a man who has made his decision. Maybe you are right. Maybe fighting makes it worse before it gets better. But if we do not fight, if we let him take what is yours because we are afraid, then we are teaching Lily and Tommy that bullies always win. That might makes right, that there is no point standing up for yourself. Grace's eyes fill with tears. What if someone dies? Samuel's grip on her shoulders tightens. What if we live the rest of our lives as cowards? The question hangs between them. Around them, neighbors are starting to leave. The sun climbing higher. The day beginning despite the destruction. Survey report goes to Judge Morrison this morning, Samuel says. Diego should be back from Helena today with the handwriting expert. Tomorrow we make our case. And if Blackwood wants to burn down the whole county to stop us, let him try. He stands, looks at Eleanor, who nods once. At Diego, who straightens despite his exhaustion. We are not backing down, Samuel says. Grace looks at the smoking ruins, at the neighbors who stayed to help, at Samuel standing like a wall against the darkness. Okay, she says finally. Her voice is small but growing stronger. We fight. Lily breaks free from Eleanor, runs to Grace. I want to fight too. Tommy follows, wrapping his arms around Grace's legs. Fight, he echoes in his tiny voice. Samuel looks at his children, at these 3 survivors who have been through more than most adults face in a lifetime, at their determination, their courage, their refusal to be broken. Something shifts in his chest, some last wall finally crumbling. He opens his arms. They come to him, all 3. Grace first, then Lily, then Tommy. He holds them close, this makeshift family built from grief and necessity and something deeper, something that feels like grace. Eleanor watches from a few feet away. There are tears on her cheeks. The sun breaks through the clouds, illuminates the destruction. But in that light, Samuel sees something else. Green shoots of grass pushing up through the mud beside the barn's foundation. New growth, unstoppable, surviving despite the fire, despite the cold, despite everything that tried to kill it. Spring has come, and with it understanding. The barn can be rebuilt. Money can be earned back. But if he teaches these children to surrender in the face of cruelty, that damage cannot be repaired. Some things are worth any cost. Diego clears his throat. Sir, I should ride to town. Make sure the sheriff knows about the fire. Do that, Samuel says, and check if the handwriting expert arrived. Eleanor steps closer. I will stay with the children today. Help them clean up. Make sure they eat. Thank you, Nora. She touches his arm briefly. What you said to Grace about teaching them to fight. That is the most important thing you have done since you found them. Is it? Eleanor smiles. They needed someone to save them from freezing. But more than that, they needed someone to show them how to stand up after being knocked down. How to keep going when everything says quit. She looks at the green shoots in the mud. How to grow despite the fire. Samuel nods slowly. He is exhausted. His hands are blistered. His savings are gone. His barn is destroyed. But standing here with his children pressed close, watching spring grass push through burned earth, he feels something he has not felt in 15 years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of someone clinging to anything that might save them, but the solid, stubborn hope of someone who has decided to fight, who has chosen to believe that some things are worth protecting no matter the cost. He looks at Grace, at the way she holds Lily and Tommy close, at the set of her jaw that reminds him so much of Catherine. Come on, he says, let us get you inside. Warm, fed, what about the barn? We will rebuild it. Maybe not today, maybe not this month, but we will rebuild. Because that is what you do when something tries to break you. He starts walking toward the house. His children follow. Behind them, the sun climbs higher. The green shoots catch the light. And somewhere Samuel thinks Catherine is watching. Keep living, she had written. He is living now, fighting now, refusing to surrender now, and he will teach his children to do the same. Whatever comes next, they will face it together. As a family, the real family, the kind that chooses each other, the kind that stands together when the world says run, the kind that grows through fire.